to be the mayor of the city of St. Louis. I'm Charlie Hinderleiter, Director of Government Affairs at St. Louis Realtors. Today's forum has been organized by the Missouri Growth Association, St. Louis Realtors, and the Urban Land Institute St. Louis. Thank you to all of the members of those organizations for joining us for this important conversation. We've had more than 215 people sign up for today's event. I want to thank Treasurer Jones and Alderwoman Spencer for taking time out of their busy schedules to be with us today. Before we start, I want to lay out how the candidate forum will work. Our candidate forum provides the opportunity for both candidates to talk about some of the most pressing issues facing our community and how they might handle those issues as mayor. Our forum is not a debate. Instead, we want to hear each candidate's ideas and policies that will help drive our region forward. Both candidates have agreed to the following forum rules. We flipped a coin and Treasurer Jones will provide the first opening statement, followed by Alderwoman Spencer. Alderwoman Spencer will then proceed to answer the first question first, then questions will alternate between candidates in a snake-like fashion. For example, Alderwoman Spencer will go to the first question, then Treasurer Jones will answer the first question, and then answer the second question back to back. The order will proceed like this through the closing statements. The questions were agreed upon beforehand, and both candidates will receive the same amount of time to answer each question. Each candidate will have 2 minutes for opening statements. There are 8 questions, and each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and then we'll end with 2 minutes for closing statements. I want to again remind both candidates that the members of these organizations are here to listen to your answers to their most pressing questions, and the topics for our questions today were submitted by the members of the organizations. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Treasurer Jones. Tashara Jones is the treasurer of the city of St. Louis. She was first elected to that post in 2012 and has been reelected twice. Prior to that, she served in the Missouri House from 2009 to 2013. Treasurer Jones has a master's degree from Hampton University and a Master of Health Administration. Please welcome Treasurer Tashara Jones. Treasurer Jones, your opening statement, please.
Great, thank you for having me today. Again, my name is Tashara Jones and I use the she series pronouns. And I'm also formerly a real estate agent. Since I began my career as a public servant, I've worked to make sure that the St. Louis we hand over to the next generation isn't as broken as the one we inherited. And that means facing up to the harsh realities of our past and saying yes to the brighter opportunities of our future. 20 years ago, I lost my mother to cancer. I was barely an adult and my life came apart at the seams. It took me 10 years to rebuild. I worked hard, but I was also lucky. I had a father who loved me, a family who prayed for me, and a grandmother who wouldn't let me fail. Today, everyone isn't so lucky because where does a child go when a member of their network comes down with COVID? Or what does a mother do when a stray bullet erases another innocent child's future? These and many questions go unanswered while the city goes about business as usual. Well, it's time to say no to business as usual and say yes to a St. Louis that's ready to tackle the 21st century. You should be able to succeed here regardless of your skin color, who you love, how you worship, your zip code, or any identity you hold. I want to build a St. Louis where everyone feels welcome, and I know that we can do that together. In the St. Louis that you and I are going to build together, youth will be at the center of our planning. Police will not be the only answer when you dial 911. Tax revenues will help fix our leaky civic systems, and your government will be open to you. See, this is about all of you, whether you live in Penrose, Holly Hills, or everywhere in between. I want to build our St. Louis, united, strong, confident, and equitable. And I know that we can do that together. So on April 6th, elect Tashara Jones for mayor of the city of St. Louis. Thank you. You're on mute, Charlie.
I just figured it out. Thank you. And happy birthday to Treasurer Jones. Thank you for your opening statement, and we look forward to hearing from you during our question and answer segment. Now I have the pleasure of introducing Alderwoman Kara Spencer. Kara Spencer is the Alderwoman for the 20th Ward. She was first elected to that post in 2015 and was reelected in 2019. Alderwoman Spencer has a bachelor's degree in mathematics from Truman State University. Please welcome Alderwoman Kara Spencer.
Thank you, Charlie, and thank you for having me today. I have to say, I never thought I'd be running for mayor. I'm not a lifelong politician. I spent, in fact, a decade and a half in the private sector working with Fortune 100 and 500 companies around the globe, helping them make smart strategic decisions to help them grow their businesses. But in 2015, I was living a normal life as a single mom with a normal job when the only free public pool here on the south side, a safe place for our kids and an asset for our communities, was closed by the city. And there was no plan to reopen it. So it was that year I ran for alderman against an entrenched 20-year incumbent in a race that looked impossible, but I won. And I got right to work with the relentless determination. I got that pool up and running before summer hit. And now that pool serves as a symbol for what our neighborhoods used to be and what they can be if we work together and lead with our citizens' best interests at the heart of our actions. Since my first day at the Board of Aldermen, I've helped move our city forward, standing up for everyday St. Louisans, reining in the predatory payday lending industry, protecting communities from contamination and demolition, and coming down hard on absentee landlords like Paul McKee. I represent one of the most challenged districts in the city, and I helped turn these neighborhoods around, increasing building permits by a whopping 1,200% in the first 4 years, and turning over half of our city-owned vacant parcels into private hands. And I want to take this effort and this momentum citywide. I love St. Louis, and I believe in our city, but we aren't going to solve our problems because we want to. We need a mayor who's going to do the real hard work of leading, and that means tackling issues like crime, poverty, and racial segregation with the same energy and citizen-centered fervor that I came to the table with when I relentlessly fought airport privatization. We have unprecedented opportunities ahead. Post-COVID mobility, climate migration, we're going to see $500 million from the federal government in the next couple of weeks in federal aid. We have to be strategic about investing these dollars. We are a phenomenal city on the biggest, mightiest river in the nation. We have the best baseball team, the best people, but we have to change the way we're doing business. And I'm running for mayor to bring hope back to our city.
Alderman Spencer, thank you so much for your opening statement. We look forward to hearing from you in our question and answer segment, which we're going to dive into right now. So question one will go first to Alderwoman Spencer and then second to Treasurer Jones. We are groups that care about the built environment. So let's get started with a getting to know you question. What's one of your favorite places in the city of St. Louis? Alderwoman Spencer. On mute though.
Okay, one of my favorite places has got to be the St. Louis Arch. I spend a lot of time there in the summers. The access point, it really describes and is the symbol of our city, being the gateway to the West. And, the location there in the heart of our city, I believe, should be the center focus of redeveloping our downtown area. Going up and down the riverfront, we have a phenomenal bike trail. We have access to a lot of different amenities, but they're really undervalued and under invested in. And if I'm elected mayor, I'm going to use that focal point of the riverfront, the largest, mightiest river in the United States, as a gathering spot, and look to cities like Detroit that have revitalized their downtown through investment along the riverfront, bringing investment not just through the federal land there, but up and down the riverfront. We have a ton of opportunities, real estate opportunities that can really help propel our community forward. The logistical assets along that riverfront are not just good for entertainment and providing that for families, but we have the second largest inland port in the United States, the most efficiently functioning port in the US, and the logistical assets we have there, access to 6 of the 7 largest railroad carriers in the United States, is phenomenal and off the charts. So I have to say, I love the Arch. I love our riverfront. I'm looking at the Mississippi out of my home office here, and I'd like to see our entire community, our region, really rally around the asset that we have there.
Treasurer Jones, same question. What's one of your favorite places in St. Louis?
Investment can't just be focused on downtown. And so one of my favorite places is actually in the center of the city, close to my house, which is in North St. Louis. I don't live too far from Forest Park. Forest Park has a ton of free amenities, like our zoo, our museums, and also have, music in the summertime. They have, opportunities for kids to learn and grow new skills, such as golf. I put my son in the golf programs there in the summer, which are for children who can't afford regular golf lessons. That's one of my favorite places. And also, through Great Rivers Greenway, they have been trying to connect all of the parts of the city through greenways. And one of them goes right by my house. And my son actually uses it to ride his bike to school pretty frequently. But we have to recognize that St. Louis is one of the most hyper-segregated cities in the country, and we can't expect the city to succeed if half of it has been left to fail. And as a result, North St. Louis hasn't seen investment in decades. My neighborhood hasn't seen investment in decades. And we need to change that trajectory because a lot of the crime can be pointed to the fact that people have no hope in their neighborhoods if all they see is dilapidated buildings, vacant lots, and trash not picked up for days. So we have to show people that we want to invest in them and then invest and make those investments visible to them, so we can see our city turn the corner and start to rebuild our population.
All right. Question 2 will go first to Treasurer Jones and then Alderman Spencer. Public safety has been a central issue in this mayoral race. How will you approach the issue of crime as mayor?
I think we need, well, not think, I know that we need to approach public safety in a more holistic fashion. So some of the things that I'd like to do is use all of the tools in the toolbox when it comes to prevention. That's currently our Cure Violence program. Also looking at focused deterrence, which was a central part of my public safety platform in 2017. Declaring gun violence as a public health crisis, bringing everyone to the table because gun violence just doesn't stop at Skinker Boulevard or the Mississippi River. We need to bring our people from the West and to the east to the table and realize that we are our brother's keeper. We do have shared destiny. And if St. Louis fails, the rest of the region fails. So I stand ready to work with all of our neighbors, again, to the west and to the east, to bring all of the solutions to the table, to make sure that we are working all together in sync to address gun violence and public safety. And then also put the public back in public safety. That means transforming our police departments and our fire departments because as I said in my opening remarks, police should not be the only answer when you dial 911. And so I look forward to staffing our police department with other professionals such as mental health counselors, social workers, substance abuse counselors, and then actually having them follow up as we talk to people as they dial 911. That's also staffing up our 911 operators to make sure that calls are answered when you call. So a whole host of things, but that's just a little piece of what I'd like to do on public safety.
Well, thank you so much. Alderman Spencer, same question. How will you approach the issue of crime as mayor?
Oh, crime has got to be the #1 issue of the next administration. We cannot be a city that grows, a successful city, without addressing the violence. We have to get serious about crime, and that means more than just catchphrases. When I launched this campaign, I went to the cities that have been successful at addressing violence, and make no mistake, there are lots of them. St. Louis has been sticking out like a sore thumb for failing to comprehensively address violence. So that's why looking at those cities that have been successfully addressing violence, I took from those cities the pieces which have been working very well there and developed a 10-step plan that really outlines what I will do if elected to serve as our next mayor. It's on my website, but I'll go through it really quickly here for those of you who haven't taken a look. #1, we have got to use data-driven programs that have worked in other cities. That does start with focused deterrence. And if I'm elected mayor, I am committed to bringing that here and bringing the folks that have been successful at putting it in place in other cities. #2, we have got to be more efficient and effective at the policing that we are deploying. It's very clear that we have no strategy for dealing with violence. And if I'm elected mayor, this will stop. We will bring in Chief Chuck Ramsey, who helped put together the Teneo report to get that in line and get our intelligence sharing between departments running in line with other departments nationally. We have got to get serious about answering 911 calls. This is an issue I've been calling attention to for several years, but if I'm elected mayor, we have a plan to put a dedicated funding stream in place to streamline our 911 answering system and offload any additional calls to surrounding jurisdictions. But it's about long-term and short-term solutions. We have got to think outside of our police department. I'm committed to putting in place a problem landlord unit, which will help shore up investments, but also hold our absentee property owners accountable for the degradation and the illegal activity that's taking place in many of our vacant properties throughout the city.
All right, thank you so much. Question 3 will be first to Alderman Spencer and then Treasurer Jones. While transit ridership is down, we know transit will play a critical role coming out of the pandemic, providing access, equity, and much needed jobs and an economic boost to our economy. How will your administration make transit a priority?
Oh, it's such an important question. In order to be a thriving city, we have to have access to jobs and housing throughout the region. I have been a proponent of increasing and expanding our public transit well before my time serving in public office. Leaning into that, it's not just me and those of us here on this call who support expanding public transit. The voters, the residents of the city of St. Louis, overwhelmingly passed a tax just a few years ago to provide funding to expand our transit. And we are collecting as a city well over $10 million a year for that expansion. Now, we have been focusing on making that investment in light rail, which is which has been a great idea. But I really think that it's time to pivot that conversation. If elected mayor, I'm going to take that $10 million, those funds we're collecting right now, and shift the focus to shoring up public safety within our existing structure and investigating an alternative, bus rapid transit, which is a much more nimble and cost-effective approach to public transit. So we know with that $10 million a year, it's pennies compared to the $1 billion of infrastructure that the light rail system would actually cost. And so if we're able to pivot, I think we'll do two things. One, we'll make our system much more nimble, and that will allow us to account for shifts in transit in general. And I'm talking about driverless cars and other things that are coming down the pipeline. And two, allow us to make those investments now, whereas waiting for light rail would be a years and years, decades long conversation. So I am committed to putting that at the forefront, recognizing that it will help grow the economic activity in our communities where that expansion will take place, and that voters have overwhelmingly supported by putting their money where their votes are in supporting the expansion sales tax.
Thank you. Treasurer Jones, how will your administration make transit a priority?
Well, as treasurer, I was fortunate enough to invest $2 million and work with East West Gateway in order to update the North-South MetroLink study so we can get back in the pipeline for federal funding to expand MetroLink and build the much needed North-South line. At the time, we didn't have much cooperation with St. Louis County, so there was a lot of disjointed efforts there. But when elected, I already have a great working relationship with Dr. Sam Page and look forward to continuing to work with him to make the North-South line a reality. And then also our current transportation secretary and I are good friends, Mayor Pete Buttigieg. He and I serve on a couple of national boards together, and I look forward to working with him to see what infrastructure investments the Biden administration is going to make. So St. Louis stands ready to pick that project back up, and also work with our current metro to expand other transit options. Because right now, with our bus lines aren't getting people to where they need to be effectively either. So how do we provide more money for metro to make sure that people can get to jobs using our current metro system, or even to vote? I was speaking to a senior citizen earlier today who said that her seniors are having problems catching our existing bus line to get to the grocery store, to get to places that they need to be. So not only do we need to shore up our existing transit availability, but also invest in more light rail across the region, because any mark of a world-class city is its public transit that they offer its citizens.
Thank you so much. Question 4 will be for Treasurer Jones and then Alderman Spencer. Historically, it seems that the use of development incentives in the city has been led by project creation, meaning incentives are initiated as projects are initiated. What role do you see development incentives playing in the effort to attract investment and grow infrastructure in the city under your administration? Would you consider creating a structure by which incentives might lead or attract development in certain areas? Treasurer Jones.
So I think that we have unfortunately suffered from an overuse of development incentives in certain areas. The recent audit from Nicole Galloway showed that 52% of tax incentives went to 4 projects located in 4 wards. That means that we aren't making intentional investments in North St. Louis and parts of South St. Louis. And again, we cannot expect St. Louis to be everything that it can be if half of it is left to fail. So I plan on using some of those same development tools and pushing them to developments in North St. Louis and parts of South St. Louis, where we have commercial deserts, grocery store deserts, food deserts, bank deserts. We need to make sure that all of our residents have access to the resources that they need to not just survive, not just to survive, but to also thrive. And also, just because I'm talking about using tax incentives in a different way does not mean that I'm anti-development. I think that we need to use them responsibly, pair them with community benefit agreements, and also use inclusionary zoning when it comes to new market rate apartments that are being built. And if they don't build the new market, if they don't build affordable units within market rate housing, then that money should go to build up the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and we can build that fund up to fund more affordable housing projects on the local level instead of always waiting for the lottery at the state level. So there are several things that we can do with development incentives, but also using them in a responsible way and not giving 95% when 40 or 50% would suffice.
Thank you. Alderman Spencer, same question.
Well, I am bullish on St. Louis, and we're going to grow over the next few years if I'm elected mayor, and that there's no doubt about it. We have a federal government that's coming to the table to support cities like we haven't seen in our lifetimes. And it's important that the city is judicious about its use of tax incentives for its own bottom line. And that's not only good for the city, but it's good for developers. Our developer community needs a city that's smart about its use of incentive packages so they can be successful investing here. Nobody wants to invest in a city that is just sort of willy-nilly about it. And we have been reactive in development. And that means that, as you pointed out, that we are really reacting to projects and proposed by developers. I will reorient this relationship with our development community by investing in planning. The city has historically invested more in printing than planning, and this leaves the planning up to the developers. And it really puts North St. Louis at a very major disadvantage by failing to communicate the value of investing in North St. Louis. The last 10 years of economic expansion throughout the United States, the region of St. Louis has performed at a quarter of the national average. Our behinds were kicked by, not just Nashville and Louisville, but Springfield, Missouri. And that is because when you look at Springfield, they have a planning department 3 times the size of the city of St. Louis's planning department. And if I'm elected mayor, I will make investing in planning for our future a pillar of my administration, and really so we can communicate the value of investing throughout the city of St. Louis. And that means particularly in those areas most disinvested of in North St. Louis.
Thank you so much. Question 5 will be to Alderman Spencer and then Treasurer Jones. As organizations interested in strengthening the city's built environment, our members work regularly with staff at the St. Louis Development Corporation, or SLDC. What goals do you have for SLDC under your administration?
Well, SLDC, St. Louis Development Corporation, plays an incredibly important role. They're the agency that really vets the projects, the investment proposals that we see, and they give us a thumbs up or thumbs down to the Board of Aldermen, who then passes the incentive packages. We fund currently the SLDC through the fees and fines that developers pay to have those projects considered. And that really creates an inverse relationship with our development corporation, that agency that should really be vetting those. If I'm elected mayor, I will look to reorienting that relationship by funding SLDC, some of its operation out of the general fund, so that we can have a much more collaborative relationship and a much more proactive relationship with our community, so that we can take in information and really drive investment rather than being reactive to it. And that looks like going to communities that have high levels of need and really understanding what would be supported. For example, a grocery store, and going out and issuing out an RFP so that we can see development as the result of direct communication with our community. I am very hopeful by the announcement of SLDC at the beginning of this year that that the shift is going to be neighborhood focused. And if I'm elected mayor, that will continue, and that will only grow from there to be oriented around the communities that our development corporation should be focused on. I think, as I pointed out earlier, the reactive nature of that relationship is one that needs to be reoriented, but really combining the planning agencies from our St. Louis Development Corporation and the administration, the sort of administrative side of city government will be a key piece of making that proactive approach to development successful.
Thank you. Treasurer Jones, what goals do you have for SLDC under your administration?
So I want SLDC to be more proactive rather than reactive. We have been reactive in a lot of ways to developers, and we need to be proactive. And one of the things that happened recently with SLDC that I'm a little bit disappointed in is how they spent $800,000 on an equitable development report to tell us what we already knew, which was we need to involve the neighborhood in development decisions when we are considering projects in their neighborhoods. So I am going to totally reorient SLDC to be more proactive rather than reactive, and also be more community focused. So we need an SLDC director that has the community first in mind. And so that's what I'm going to be looking for as they send me the applicants for Otis Williams' replacement, because it's going to be important that we have someone that has experience doing neighborhood development and working with community and in community as we move forward. So also, I don't think we need to spend one dime of general revenue on SLDC. They collect plenty of money and have plenty of staff in SLDC to currently do the things that they need to do. So we'll work within their existing budget, their existing fees that they collect, to be more proactive rather than reactive, and putting the community first.
Thank you very much. Question 6 will go to Treasurer Jones and then Alderman Spencer. In our city, nearly 25,000 properties sit vacant. They weigh on neighbors who live near them, erode our region's competitive advantage, and contribute to crime, decreased tax revenue and property values, and poor health. These problems disproportionately impact Black residents. It is a challenge no single sector or city department can solve on its own. It requires strong mayoral leadership that coordinates city department efforts with those of neighborhoods. How would you address the residential vacancy issue, and how do you see addressing what may be a looming commercial vacancy wave? Treasurer Jones.
So yes, one of the, fortunately, one of the things that I'm responsible for in the treasurer's office is we have a lot of commercial property as well. And we've seen that during the pandemic, some of our commercial tenants have had a hard time paying their rent, and we've lost several tenants. And so that's going to be an issue going forward for the foreseeable future as we're now doing this in our homes. And we'll have to address that accordingly. But I think that this is an opportunity also with like you said, the 25,000 parcels that the city owns, to come up with creative programs to try to put those parcels into the hands of small business owners, coupled with technical assistance and coupled with capital in order to build those neighborhoods back. And so I look forward to doing that, along with working with our banking industry and financial industry, which I currently do as treasurer, having banking relationships with over 13 to 15 different financial institutions in the city currently. So how do we put all of our collective heads together to address vacancy, to address rebuilding St. Louis? And again, we have to be intentional about our investment, just like intentional investment in the Central Corridor and downtown has been over the last several years. This investment has been intentional in North St. Louis for several decades, and we need to reverse that trend.
Alderman Spencer, how would you address the residential vacancy issue, and how do you see addressing what may be a looming commercial vacancy wave?
You're absolutely right. I mean, this cannot be done by any one person or any one agency. Addressing vacancy is going to take a coalition, and I'm going to have to give a shout out to the Vacancy Collaborative, which is a newly formed organization of several other organizations and folks involved in this. And it's coalitions like the Vacancy Collaborative that can really help move this forward. I mentioned a couple of initiatives that the problem landlord unit that can be helpful by identifying some of those really problematic property owners and holding their feet to the fire by way of real fees and fines associated with the dereliction of our communities. As an alderman, I have worked on this issue and prioritized it in my legislative capacity, moving forward an initiative with my former colleague, Alderman Chris Carter, put together the Mo to Own program, which has transferred hundreds of parcels into the hands of everyday citizens who live next to city-owned parcels. And it's creative thinking like that, looking to other cities for what has been successful that can help lead this forward. But we're going to have to lean into and lean on to the work of our community organizations like Sldc and others who are involved in the Vacancy Collaborative to help us address these issues. I have to also point out that legal services of Eastern Missouri and other organizations like that are playing a vital role. But the important piece for the next administration is to give voice to those folks who are doing the work within our communities and leaning into them and for the solutions to drive addressing vacancy. But the real elephant in the room here is a lack of growth in our regional population. And the stagnation of St. Louis in a broader sense has resulted in the gentle slide westward of our population and a hollowing out of our city. So until we really start to address the structural issues of the overall region, we're going to continue to see this issue plague us.
Thank you. Question 7 will go to Alderman Spencer and then Treasurer Jones. With good starts to better collaboration between entities such as SLDC and the STL partnership, and now in the private sector with the entities making up Greater St. Louis, Inc., what other areas are ripe for collaboration in the region, particularly as it relates to the public sector, and how will you help drive that progress?
Yeah, this is a segue from the last question we just talked about. Without regional collaboration and a regional vision for growth, we're going to continue to see the broader St. Louis region stagnate and the city of St. Louis continue to lose population. So this has got to be an incredibly important top priority of the next administration. So the area, to answer your question more specifically, there's so many areas for possible collaboration within the region. And I see a real paradigm shift in the last couple of years in this conversation, in that the conversation about regionalism has really been driven by St. Louis County and many of the regional leaders, the municipal mayors out there in the St. Louis Municipal League, who set the table with the Board of Freeholders by putting the funding together to do that. And that's important to recognize because it is important that the next mayor of the city really work with those regional leaders to drive that conversation forward, to be community-led, community-oriented, and really driven by the people that it will impact, our residents. I would start with leaning into the Board of Freeholders, setting that table, and hearing what our regional leadership wants to see in collaboration. I see potential with regards to a regional approach to health, addressing some of the underlying issues, particularly the sexually transmitted diseases, for which we're number one, drug addiction and other issues that a regional approach, including homelessness, funding of those could be very helpful. Education being a key driver of neighborhood growth and real stabilization for our communities, and economic development, a real strategic regional commitment to driving economic activity and planning can really put us back on the map for investing for the years ahead.
Thank you. Treasurer Jones, what other areas are ripe for collaboration in the region, particularly as it relates to the public sector, and how will you help drive that progress?
I would keep my comments focused on two major issues. Number one, health. Right now, we're in the middle of a global pandemic, and it is no more evident than the disparities that are laid bare by African Americans and other minorities suffering from COVID and the effects of COVID, the joblessness, businesses closing more than any other race. And we need to make sure that as we move forward, that our health departments are in sync and are in line with each other, so we don't have different health directives coming from St. Louis County and St. Louis City on if you can eat inside or eat outside, or what the capacity is for indoor dining. And also I look forward to exploring my existing relationship with Dr. Sam Page, because we talk about this pretty much every week as I'm trying to find resources for my community to get vaccinated. And the other place is workforce development. I believe that the primary driver of crime is poverty. And how do we cure poverty? By making sure that people have access to jobs that pay a living wage. So we need to have a holistic and a focused approach on making sure that everybody who wants a job can get a job. That means bringing our unions to the table as well, because unions also have great paying jobs. It's a great entry point into the middle class, and making sure that we are attacking joblessness and workforce development with rigor and with real focused intensity.
Thank you. Question 8 will go first to Treasurer Jones and then Alderwoman Spencer. We are all invested in the future successes of St. Louis City. Many of our members also do business across the region and even across the country with other governments and agencies. Our members and our organizations compare notes on best practices, collect and assess data, and forge relationships. If you were elected mayor, how will you leverage the resources of organizations like the MGA, the Realtors, and ULI?
Well,
Treasurer Jones.
Part of your question talked about relationships across this country, and that's something I already have. There are several mayors from across this country who are already invested in this campaign, many from cities that a lot of your members are maybe already investing in, like Denver and Birmingham and Little Rock, Arkansas, and Charlotte, North Carolina. So I look forward to leveraging those relationships with those mayors, bringing their best practices on economic development and growth to the table, and making sure that we can also participate in that type of growth. I have been treasurer for 8 years, and one of the things I've been able to do is build relationships across this country. So my election will immediately put St. Louis back on the map, because I'll have relationships all over this country with people who stand ready to invest in St. Louis and stand ready to help us become one of the great cities that's going to grow in the Midwest.
Thank you. Alderman Spencer, if you were elected mayor, how will you leverage the relationships and resources of organizations like the MGA, the Realtors, and ULI?
Sure. Those relationships are going to be critical. The work that you all are doing right now to promote the region, to promote growth, can't be overstated. I'm going to lean into ULI in particular to help us really organize around planning for our city and our region and our neighborhoods. We have got to set our city ready to be on the receiving end of climate refugees and identifying what the needs of those folks are going to be, and preparing our development community to open our arms and be ready to receive them. We're expecting to see 40 to 50 million Americans be relocating from coastal cities here in the next decade. And what better place to relocate than here in St. Louis? Supporting policies and programs will spur economic growth and job opportunities. I'll be leaning into making sure that we are telling the story of St. Louis to the broader community, including the fact that we have been preparing ourselves in some regards to be at the forefront, putting St. Louis back on the map by increasing EV charging capacity, putting St. Louis, especially as it comes to climate change, and putting us at the forefront there. But I think you all will be able to play an incredibly important role in retelling the story of St. Louis and what we look like to the rest of the nation. But that planning piece is going to be critical to planning for a better future for St. Louis.
Thank you, Alderman Spencer, for your responses this morning. We're now going to move on to closing statements, and I'll turn it over to Alderwoman Spencer for your closing remarks. Alderwoman, the floor is yours.
Wow, this is the fastest forum I think we've ever participated in. I just want to thank you all for the thoughtful questions, today, and for tuning in. What's on the table here is so incredibly important. The next few years, we're going to see unprecedented opportunity, as I mentioned, on the forefront of this conversation. We're going to be seeing hundreds of millions of dollars from the federal government to the city of St. Louis. And we have got to be smart about how we are investing them. We've got to be positioning St. Louis for growth in the broader scope of things. The climate refugees that we're expecting to see floating around the United States, is an unprecedented opportunity for cities like St. Louis with a low cost of living, high level of amenities, and incredible cultural assets that can be attractive to people throughout the United States. But we're going to have to get serious about addressing the real structural issues. Crime has got to be the #1 solution, and we have got to approach this with a reasonable, tried and true method, tested out and proven in other cities. And this has got to be a program, a set of programs that works not against, but with our law enforcement community to help drive the solution and the response that our residents who are experiencing unprecedented levels of violence can rely on and grow from. So we've got to focus first and foremost on addressing some of the real structural issues, but be hopeful and positioning the St. Louis city and the broader region for growth. And if I'm elected mayor, I am bullish on our future by investing in planning and leaning into the relationships with folks like you all who can help drive the planning that our community needs in order to be in a growth posture. Thanks so much for tuning into the mayor's race. This is such an important election cycle, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to talk to you all today.
Alderwoman Spencer, thank you again for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it. Now I'll turn it back to Treasurer Jones for her closing remarks. Treasurer Jones, the floor is yours.
Again, thank you, Charlie, and thank you to everyone who tuned in today. When I was growing up in the Hamilton Heights, Wells Goodfellow, and Walnut Park neighborhoods, I wanted to be many things, but a politician was something I said I would never do. Well, my mama, God rest her soul, always used to tell me that the quickest way to make God laugh is to tell him what you would never do. See, it's one thing to have a vision or a platform or a plan, but it's something totally different to turn that vision or platform into a reality. And that's exactly what I've done in the last 8 years in the Treasurer's office. I'm the only candidate in this race with the executive experience of turning a vision into a reality. Sorry. I'm sorry about that. It's one thing to have a vision or a platform, but it's something totally different to turn that vision or platform into a reality. And that's exactly what I've done in the Treasurer's office the last 8 years. I'm the only candidate in this race with the executive experience of turning a vision into a reality, the management experience of leading a staff of hundreds of people and millions of dollars, and the relationships on the state and national levels to put St. Louis back on the map. I'm asking you to dream bigger, because bigger and better is indeed possible. But this change won't happen automatically. This kind of change, not incremental change, but real transformational change, requires a mayor who's ready to embrace a vision for a new St. Louis. You need a champion and someone that will fight for you. We need a mayor who's ready to lead on day one, and I will be that mayor. I'm running to create our St. Louis, united, strong, confident, and equitable. My name is Tashara Jones. I use the she series pronouns, and I'm asking you to say yes to me for mayor of the city of St. Louis. Thank you.
Treasurer Jones, thank you again for being with us this morning. With that, I'll conclude today's candidate forum. I'd like to thank Kelly Annis, Dave Sweeney, and Megan Warner for all their work in putting together today's forum. Thank you for joining us today. And if you're a St. Louis City resident, please be sure to vote on Tuesday, April 6th. Thanks so much.
Thank you.